If I'm focusing on the block, well, I'm creating the block, and it's exactly as you said, but I'm also missing everything that's happening over here, because all my focus is here on the block, and it's like life is happening here, and this is the feed, this is the fuel for the creative outlet, as I feed in the experiences of life, and even just to sit back and watch life is me being part of life. I have this thirst, and the beauty about this thirst is I know it will never be fully quenched, but it gets quenched partially, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, which keeps me going. And it's unveiling all that wisdom that's stored there. It's stored in us all. Every one of us knows absolutely everything. We just have to tap into it. More avenues of that fire to be able to express outwards. So it's kind of just getting that dance and that rhythm of life, and finding out, like, again, as you said, it's my rhythm. What do I need? Because if I'm too buzzy, I need to get something out, And then if I'm too flat, I need to get something in.
Hi everyone! Today I have Peter Kelly, an amazing dear friend, which I haven't seen in a long time, but here we are reconnecting in this inspiring new podcast. So, Peter, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having us as well. It's always pleasure to see you again. It's been some time, as you said, but yeah, exciting. Looking forward to what comes up.
We were connecting in the ether instead, yeah.
Yeah, this topic around creativity has been big for the last while, so yeah, I think it's been seeding someplace.
So it's ripe now. So yeah, let's start there. What is creativity to you?
Interesting, because as I was saying, the last couple of months, I think it's something that's become a lot more clear to me in my own aspect around creativity. And I think for a long time I thought about creativity as in an outlet, something that would be just, I can take something that's inside me and I can take it out and create a bit of balance, or have a bit of a cathartic release. But in the last couple of months, it's kind of overtaken me in a much different way. A much deeper perception of it than I've ever kind of experienced before. And for me, it's just expression of life. I think now is where I'm at with what I'm starting to see it as, to keep it somewhat contained.
Yeah. So yeah, leading on from that, living your life in creativity is living in your life in your greatest expression. Then, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's the outward form of your essence, I think, or something like so. It's every part of it, it's absolutely every part of life. And it's just something that's come really, really strong for me over the last few months, where I'm at myself, and just starting to really, I think, trust it as well is probably a good word to have it, is the fact that it's not just something that has a specific time or place, but it's a constant, it's a constant of life.
Yeah, you're living your life as the artist, being constantly in flow and inspired by everything around you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything around me has always kind of inspired me, but I don't think I ever really looked at it through the depth of that lens, we'll say, and looked at it as the creative part, I suppose. I always thought of it before. It's my analysis of my surroundings, or my analysis of the universe, of myself in it, and what have you. But now I'm really starting to see that as the synergy. That is it's my muse, I suppose you could say. It's the constant influx of ideas and perceptions and ideas that then formulate who I am, and how that internally processes into the essence of who I am, and to express that then, to receive it in and then to express it back outwards, in a kind of a constant rhythm, like.
Yeah, and this actually beautifully brings us to the alchemy of the creative process, because when you're embarking on, a small project, even if you're in that constant flow of reciprocity and giving, you're rebirthing yourself through every project that you do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And alchemy is a good term as well, because that's one of the terms that I would subtly, underliningly kind of label myself with as well, because I see alchemy in absolutely everything. And it is that exactly as you said, that's kind of the transformative process. And I mean, a lot of...
So to interrupt you there, for anyone who doesn't know what alchemy is, if you had to give a quick sentence.
Oh, a quick sentence. So yeah, I mean, alchemy, and it's like anything, it can be applied for me in any layer, macro to micro, basically, that you want to look at. But alchemy for me, I suppose, in an internal level, it's the transmutation. It's the transmutation from lower to higher, and like that can apply in our inner work. It can also apply in a creative avenue or absolutely anything. So kind of taking something in one form and then bringing it out in its highest vibration, I suppose, is one way of looking at it.
Traditionally, it's about taking the gold, right, or rediscovering the elixir of immortality, right?
Yeah. So like the alchemists, I mean, it's known as like the transformation of lead into gold, where you talk about, like, say, the medieval alchemists. But it's a kind of a parable of it, because again, like, what we do externally manifests or relates internally, and vice versa. So again, like the alchemists of old were like they were often the Hermeticists, who would have studied the ancient, the Hermetic approach to understand the universe and understand our placement in it. And so the process of taking lead and something in its lowest form and then transmuting into its highest of gold also applies internally. It's us taking, those parts of ourselves that we consider dense or low, maybe habits that we have or traits, and transforming them and transmuting them into something higher as well. And again, it's almost in alchemy, you talk about like finding the divinity in something, because everything comes from the all, and again, that the all is, God is a kind of a finite term, and it's a very loaded term as well. But I suppose the creator, I mean, everything is the all, everything is divine. But it's finding that divine part in it, including ourselves, including inanimate objects, and just to really find that divine part, to take it out of its material density and to bring it to its highest form. And like for me, that's what creativity is. It really is,
Yeah, and within the creative process, we might get the inspiration or the idea, but really, when the shadows are coming of why you shouldn't do this, why you should stop, that's the lead that you're trying to turn into gold, right? It might not always be about the process itself or what you're creating, but the cocoon that's around.
Yeah, because when you start to really view it through that aspect, it's you start to see so much more in it, in that process. As I said, like I often find with the process, but kind of related to alchemy, like it's okay, I have the goal, which is the gold. That's going to be the end. I know what it is. That maybe it's not always, but sometimes if it comes that way, I know what the end goal is going to be, and then I kind of forget that. I park it someplace way back there.
It's a good tip.
And then it just becomes that process, as you said, it becomes the steps to it. And, the cliche saying about, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And it really is, because in that journey, it unfolds those parts that kind of say, no, I shouldn't go to the end goal. Even though you have the end goal in place, it's like, no, I shouldn't, I'm not good enough, or what would people think if I do this? And, and all those shadow parts, those lead parts really kind of come to the surface in that kind of in that process, and it highlights so much about ourselves and our own approach to the process of creativity, or whatever it might be that we're actually approaching.
And even yesterday I was talking about this, marrying the process and falling in love within the process instead of focusing on that goal. Would you have any tips for anyone, trying to actually enjoy life as it's unfolding rather than being so focused on that goal?
Yeah, I mean, the goal, and again, for me, just around the creative side of things, this is only something I've probably uncovered in the last few months in that way. Because for me, the internal process, which I didn't really consider as creative before, up until we say the last few months, like as in the inner work, as in healing and what have you, which is a creative process. It's, you're creating the goal of yourself, basically. And I would have always looked at that as in, I'd always have the end goal and I'd leave that and do the process, but I never really looked at it from a creative viewpoint. And I think that is something that's really important. But for me anyway, with the way I approach it, I think it's important to, you have the clarity of what the goal is. So whether it's a creative project, what's the end goal of that creative project? But then I like to forget it, and just to really get engulfed in it, because there's going to be steps that are involved. As you said, sometimes the shadow aspects of ourselves come up, that we're not good enough, or will I be judged? What would people think about this? A big one for me over the last year in particular was like, they'll just think he's lost the plot, which
Same.
which is what comes through, because you're really you're untethering from everything you've been conformed to. And so that's going to take steps to maneuver that piece within you, which isn't so much what we consider about the end goal, but that's something about that you need to work on you to get that out of the way, to clear the next step towards that goal. So I think it's just allowing whatever to come up in the process of the journey, because whatever comes up is something that's vital, that has to be dealt with. And so I think it's sometimes like, okay, the macro vision is good. like the end goal, but then bring it back into the micro. What's the first step? What do I need to do right now? And then work at that. And when that's okay, the next step opens up. Like, and I try to really take it down into its most minute and small details so that I can, because it's like the devil is in the detail. If you work in the small details, then the bigger picture kind of almost flows in together.
And that's almost the tip, that we might only know the one step forward, and we have to be brave enough to take that step without knowing fully the full vision. We just get this inspiration, this idea, and we have to take that step into the unknown. And what I found as well is that the creative process or the creative project almost asks something of us, that we have to step up to become something, to shed a layer and meet that creation midway or at the end way.
Yeah, and that goes back to like the reciprocative aspect of energy. You know, your energy, like you don't receive unless you give, and you don't give to receive, but you know, whatever you do give, you will receive. And it's like, you know, you take that step and the next door opens. You know, as you said, like you can be lost, you might not know what the next step is, or you might not know even how I'm going to do it, but you know, if you have that end goal, you have an intention kind of focal point of what it is, and that has obviously come from some place in that divine kind of creative connection. And you might have no idea how you're going to get there, but I just trust, and I think that's another part that has come from me, anyway, in particular, is that part of trust, which took a long time for me in particular to get to an aspect of cultivate and really trusting that no matter how wild something might sound in my head when it comes through, that I trust that, look, I don't know how that's going to happen, I don't know how it's going to come, but if I just take this step, the one that I can see, then I trust that the next step will show itself. And now that is kind of cultivated in me, it gives me more strength then to be creative, because I kind of, after doing it a couple of times and it's kind of unfolded that way, now I know that no matter even how big something comes through to me, that okay, I don't need to know all the details. You know, I know what I need to do for right now. And once I do that, I just trust that the next piece will come.
Being the unfolding of it, even when we look at flowers during this gestation period from seed into growth and then full bloom. So it takes time, but you are a master of words, I would say. You have 2 books, The Phoenix Birth and the new one, Saturated Breath, right? So I want to speak a bit more about the power of our words and how we wield the truth that we believe in. We mentioned a little bit about it, about trusting ourselves and trusting the transmission that we have to bring something into this world. So it's a big one.
And I was just thinking, because that's for me has been like, I think what I was just saying about getting to that point of trust. The first book in particular for me was, it was
teeth and nails.
like really, like just like, oh my God, the overwhelm so many times with it, like, is just because, again, going back to what we're saying about like the kind of forgetting the goal once you have it, like that was something that really taught me. And like, you know, I often had this idea in my head about a book, like all sorts. I have loads of books that I want to write even still, like, and I want to go into a lot of depth with stuff. And that overwhelm of thinking about like the book has to be this whole completed process of cover, detail, like even just the package, like never mind even say the content of what you're going to write. And that almost stopped me and crippled me from ever stepping into it, because it's just like, there's too much involved. How am I going to do all this? But again, just coming back to that aspect of just writing. Like for me, I write. I write when I go through something. It's like the end stage, that kind of that release. When I know I've kind of gone through something, I'm able to really connect with it and just let it flow through and to come out. But for like the use of words, like for me, there's so much power in words. You know, because
abracadabra.
I mean, it literally is, and the deeper I've kind of come into my own inner work, which is also my creative work, you know, it's highlighted that aspect of what true magic is, and the power of intention. You know, once you kind of align,
Yes.
But you know yourself, that's you're aligning your own vibrational self of your essence, of your absolute essence. And once you can actually tap into that and express that, no matter how it is, like whether it's a piece of art or whether it's words or whatever, once you're aligned to that level, there's so much power goes into those words. There's so much activation goes into those words, because that energy is in it, you know, and when we're really aligned with that connection, this is what ceremonial magic is, you know. It's the use of energy into a way.
Intentionally.
Yeah, absolutely. So like when you use certain words, like for me when I write in a very symbolic way, because that's just the way that I express myself. It's how I connect to myself. It's how I get a deeper understanding to myself. And so when I put those words out symbolically, you know, it's not like reading something kind of simple, you know, that it's just a very verbatim story. It can be kind of quite complex and subconscious. And but because that energy is, I have a really good connection to when I'm actually writing the pieces in the way that I write, I know that those words don't need to actually surface value hit with people, because the energy that's in those words is what's underneath. So there'll be a subconscious activation. And that's been a big part for me, you know, and using words and kind of, you know, having that connection with words anyway, but putting it into a creative project and to put outward for people was a whole different story. Like, was a whole different challenge, we'll say, you know, because again, like what we said, I had to face so many parts of myself. You know, I'm putting words of mine out there to people who, you know, the fear of, you know, you can feel it. Like, it's that fear of rejection, the fear of all those aspects of, you know, who do I think I am? You know, because again, that's part of the journey of connect with who we are. Like, and it's, you know, the doubts that we've grown up with, and the doubts that we have in society and everything. So it was, as much as it was a creative aspect of getting words out of me and putting it into something that I could contain in a book, in a piece of art. But that process in itself was life-changing. You know, it opened so many doors within me, and it allowed me to access parts of myself. It allowed me to build trust in myself. You know, and then once you do it kind of once, you kind of think, well, I could do it again. You know, and with not as much heft and stress as the first time. It's still with its own heft and its own stress. Yeah. But that's for me has been like the big thing. But words are so powerful. Like, they really, really are. And as I said, for me, that lens of ceremonial magic, that is it. Like, you know, it's how you use a word, it's how you put a word together, like even how you put words together in a sentence. You know, I find this even with text messages sometimes. Sometimes I can get into a spin with messages sometimes, depending on who I'm texting. You know, again, if it's work, if what kind of a client it is, and, you know, you're kind of going into that mode of, you're feeling to a lot of energies with those words, because a certain word used in a certain way could be taken by somebody who's in a certain energetic way, if that makes sense. So it could activate somebody in a negative, somebody else it could activate them in a positive.
We all have our own history with words. So one thing for someone might be completely innocent, but for somebody else, it spirals them, right?
And it's even just kind of being aware of the vibration that's in words. So how I actually structure them together. Because it's a different story when I write. Like, I'm writing for me. You know, that's when I write my books. Like, that's me for me. That's me tapping into what's inside me, and then I just let it flow. So that's for me. But again, when I'm using words towards other people, I'm conscious in a much different way, and it's still creative, because I'm creating in my mind what my mouth is going to vibrationally express before it comes out. Because so when I'm talking to one person, I might use my words a certain way, you know, and use it with somebody else exactly as you said, because we're kind of conditioned and we're wired differently. But that's a creative process of, again, like, it has to come through my system. Who am I dealing with? Who am I talking to? What's in their energetic field? So that, okay, what am I going to create to put out and to speak to that person, and how that's going to come across. So that there's such depth. There is such depth in the word, like.
So there's a real power in sharing our vulnerability and sharing our heart when we don't quite know how the outside world might take it, right? So from that perspective, how would you encourage other people to still be in that pure expression, even when encountering others, right? Because we have a tendency to cut out parts of ourselves or to belittle ourselves in order to fit into this certain box.
Yeah, that's a process in itself. Like, it's a big one. And for me, I mean, I suppose just personally, I mean, that's all I can really speak on. Is like, for me with the books in particular, I mean, those books for me is it's my internal process. So like, it's as raw and as authentic of me as you could possibly get. And I suppose, I mean, for me, for example, at Instagram, when I set up Instagram, I was kind of pushed into it with a lot of resistance, because again, it was like, you have to put stuff out there for the first time. And I remember even like just I know I'm kind of digressing a little bit, but it's kind of all relevant. But when I do like daily quotes that I put up on my stories, and when I started that, I wouldn't even put P. Kelly. I wouldn't even put my name to it, because I was thinking, it's okay. It was enough to put it up there and put the words of my quotes, but to actually attach my name to it was like, it was so scary, like, you know, at that time. So there was a journey to it, like for me, myself. And then as I started to kind of write and I started to post stuff online, and I started to get a lot of good feedback from it, like, you know, and that helped, you know, that helped to kind of push me to say, okay, you know, because I had all these internal thoughts about showing this stuff to people or showing it kind of externally to the outside world, that, you know, again, those aspects, the shadow aspects and the judgments and all these things that I perceived would happen. So when I started to get kind of like a lot of good feedback and like a lot of resonance from people that were reading it and seemed to be kind of tuning into it and even getting something from it, like that helped me to kind of spur me on. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is like that creative process in itself was that book itself, even the first one, came from a journey of me dabbling with that aspect of my own vulnerability, bringing it outward and to show it to other people. But for me, I find in my creative process that I'm more creative, I'm more in tune with the absolute essence of that divine connection to that creative part. That's truer for me when I am more authentic, when I'm raw, because otherwise it doesn't fit. It feels plastic, or it feels there's something not really congruent about it for me if I'm not. And that is kind of something I've built in, that trust again over time, is to know that me in my greatest and purest creative outlet is me to be absolutely raw and vulnerable and authentic with myself. So there's been a kind of a bit of a balance on both sides, is realizing that for me to be in my truest aspect, that's going to be received obviously better as well, is for me to be more raw, to be more vulnerable, and to be more authentic. And so if I find I'm in resistance with that it's not going to come out that way. I have a process when I write. I don't ever force anything, you know. When I don't ever kind of sit down and say, right, I'm going to write today. That's not the way it works for me. This is just around the writing aspect. So for me, it's always a good gauge when I go through like an internal process, or I'm working on some big aspect that I'm healing or bringing back into balance. If I sit down, the way I work is like I have an intention. Again, it's like the end goal. I know what I want, what I'm writing about. I've just gone through this and I'm going to verbalize what that experience has been for me. And if I sit down and the pen just goes, then I know I've already made a good headway on it, or I'm coming out the other side of it. If it gets sticky, if I feel that kind of stickiness to it, then I know I'm not there. And if I try force that, I'm not being authentic. So that's kind of helped me to kind of step into that kind of rawness or that vulnerable side. But that still comes with the, how will this be taken? You know, what will people think? Will they get it? Will they think something different of me? Or will they think the truth of me? You know, all these aspects. But I think just doing it more, you know, practicing it more, kind of builds up that resilience within yourself. And again, it's about trusting yourself. And I think it gets that stage where you kind of start to think less about other people. And obviously you do think about other people, because that's also part of the creative process, because you're doing this I'm doing it for me, and to be really raw and authentic to me is what's going to resonate with other people. So kind of, you know, I have things I keep to myself, obviously, you know, which I have to. But at the same time, in the creative process, and if it is something that I am going to put out there, like it's, you know, I am thinking about like, is this going to be a benefit to people?
And editing is also part of the creative process. Yeah, shedding a layer or shedding parts of the vision.
Yeah.
In order to enhance the whole, right?
Yeah, and that goes back to the alchemy. I mean, like as you're coming from lead into gold, you know, you have to go through all those other metals. You're going through the copper, you're going through the tin, you're going through the silver. You know, so it's like you're purifying every time. And again, that like really is the editing process. It's like, okay, you know, maybe this here or there, or, you know, maybe even the punctuations for me is a big thing, because I read it a certain way and I feel it has to be read that way. You know, because in my raw authenticness in what I put into it, you know, kind of way. And that for me is often a big part. Even as I write them, I can just write. And then I go back, usually the next day I sleep on it. And I read it the next day, and sometimes I read it the next day. I'm like, I don't know where that came from. That's I impress myself sometimes. You're not going away. And sometimes I get frustrated with myself as well. It works on both sides. But then when I actually go to put it out there, it comes to the punctuation side of things, that editing. And sometimes I go, I don't like a certain word I've used. Or sometimes even as I write, so that I don't lose my flow when I'm in that kind of divine connection or that creative connection. I know there's a word I want, but I don't know what it is yet, or I can't get it. So I'll put down a mediocre word just to fill it, and I'll put a mark on it. Yeah. So then when I come back tomorrow, I'll try to connect into that, what I really wanted for that. And it has to feel full, whole.
That's really amazing, because most people, and I myself included, I would go to Google and look for a synonym to that word. So you actually allowing yourself to be in the process and allowing it to come to you is such a beautiful way of being in the creative process.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that I think that I had to kind of get to. Again, the trust thing. For me, it's about the trust thing. Is like, because I had this thing before. I had this fear when it would come through to me. I remember when I was writing, like even the first book, even going through, because I had the poems written for the first book, we'll say, but I always had this fear that I'd lose. I thought this is a window of opportunity. This is only coming through for now. That maybe this isn't an ongoing thing. So I thought it was just this window of creative aspect or divinity coming through me, channeling through me. That's really what it felt like. And I thought maybe I only have this for a couple of months. Maybe I might only have it for a week. And I had stages where I went through some kind of processes and stuff where nothing was coming. And I remember I started to question myself about maybe I've lost it. Maybe that was it. Maybe,
where is it?
Yeah, maybe that was the only window I had, the opportunity I had, and maybe it was gone. And then over time, as I started to see it comes back and it goes, and that started to give me a lot more trust and faith, even in myself, even in other aspects of life, is to say that's the wave of life.
And the magic of cycles, right? We are in winter now, so winter is introspection, closing down. You might not always be in that creative process, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's it perfectly. Is the cycles. You're not always up, whatever up is, but down is a necessary part of the up, so it's like, again, but that was a process for me as well as the creative process, as to learn about life as well, like to accept life, on life's terms, rather than trying to kind of force things the way that I want it. Force the fact that I should be able to write the whole time, which is then would be me being unauthentic, and then it wouldn't have the same impact for me as well as for other people in what I'd put out there. So I think that process in itself and kind of understanding that allowed me to kind of trust more. Because when I had that fear of, it's not going to come back, I was creating a block energetic. I was creating, I was hexing myself, using energy as a negative. Excuse me, to tell myself that, it's not going to come back. So as that kind of started to happen more, and it would come back, it started to give me that kind of trust and faith in myself to say, no, this is a constant thing. It comes at certain times where it's more intense, and then there's times where it's less intense. And again, these are the cycles, exactly as you said. So it kind of allowed me to trust the fact that, no, it is always there. It's not always going to be at the same level.
It's life force energy, right? It's always there. It just has different avenues of expression.
Absolutely. I mean, that is it exactly. I mean, that's the thing is why, as we were saying about the creative thing, which I'm really starting to understand in the last few months, is it's every aspect of life. It's living life in that creative energy. And it becomes amazing. And really that synergy kind of really taught me that is that, again, and this is Hermetic as well, and the axioms of, correspondence is it applies in everything. That cycles of flow that happens in the creative outlets is also the same flow of life. It's the same cycle, that it applies in all aspects. But that started to give me a lot more trust in myself, a lot more faith to say, that's okay. If it's not there today, it might not be here for 6 months.
And that's really difficult because in today's society, we have timelines, deadlines, trying to fit everything into a box, sitting at your desk and being like, I need to write 3 poems by 6 p.m. So being in that trust and honoring of the unraveling of the creative process takes so much courage once again to not allow yourself to crumble under that pressure, right?
Yeah. I mean that really sums it up, I think, because I think that's for me, I know I can say that killed my creative drive, is because I was trying to put it into a box, exactly I need to sit now and give it 2 hours, but I mightn't be in the space in those 2 hours. And what I'm starting to kind of adapt to my own cycle, a lot more as well, is to understand that I might not do anything for 3 weeks, but then I could have 2 days where I won't sleep and I can't stop, you know, because it's flowing through me. And I'm actually, when I'm at that stage, sometimes I just wish it would stop, because I need a break. You know, you're not going to make, because the energy gets so high in my system, and it's like, yeah, everything's moving too fast. My physical body can't even keep up with it, and I can't sleep, and I can't anything. But that 2 days, or sometimes it's only just a window of 6 hours, but in those 6 hours, I feel nurtured in what I didn't do for the 6 weeks before, if that makes sense. And so I'm kind of learning to adapt to that, to the fact that it's not something that I need to. And like, don't get me wrong, I do still have the little, you know, I have the devil on my shoulder.
It's always going to be there, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely, of course it is. Yeah, you should be doing more. You're not good enough, you know, or you need to be doing more.
What are you doing resting?
Yeah, you should be, you know, you should be creating. You should be doing something, like. But now I know that that's there, and I kind of, you know, I look at it and I acknowledge it now. I mean, I still spiral with it, don't get me wrong, but I kind of look at it and say, I know what you are, and you're not going to last. You know, the window is going to come back again, or whatever it is. But again, that's just been from, I suppose, coming to a point of trust with that, because I've kind of gone through it enough times and come out of it now to say that it is part of the cycle. Do you know, like, in a way? Whereas before I thought, no, that's the end of the cycle. It's gone now. If the creative aspect is gone, it's not going to come back. Whereas now I just trusted that is part of the creative cycle, because that downtime where I'm not doing that, now that I accept it, I just use that now to embrace life. So I'm using the creative aspect in another way, and that embracing of life is allowing me to absorb my surroundings, you know, what we mentioned earlier, and to give me more creative fuel. So, you know, I'll go off and I'll go someplace, and I'll sit someplace and I'll have a cup of tea, and I'll just look out the window and watch people pass. And
it's just as important, right? It's this, I like to think of it as the dance between Shiva Shakti, the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah.
All of life becomes this dance with life. It's not just you sitting at a desk creating something or producing a piece, but living your life in that constant expression and dance and co-creation with life, because the creation happens regardless whether you're part of it or not, but you can have a more conscious approach to it, right?
Yeah. And that's been the big key this year in particular. Actually, that's been the big piece I've gotten. Is exactly, I mean, the dance is exactly the way to describe it, like, and it really is, and it's that flow, and it's exactly as you said, it is the masculine and the feminine, it's the merging. That's the alchemical wedding, to go back to alchemy.
Sometimes you're dancing on the floor.
Yeah, but it's still a dance, and it is, and it's accepting that that's a dance, you know, and accepting that, like, you know, it's interesting, because, I mean, as I said, the synergy of everything, because everything is the one thing, and I'm starting to see that the creative outlet that I have is only there because of the downtime. Well, what I consider downtime, or used to consider downtime, because that is me relaxing my system to be able to receive. You know, as I said, so I take that time away and I'll just go for a walk, and I'll just, as I said, even sometimes just sitting in a cafe and watching people pass by. I'm in my mind reading their stories. You know, like, by the way they move, by the expression on their face. You know, you can tell a lot by people, like, energetically, and with that, I'm then in a mind for and absorbing what goes on in life, and the experience of life, and the rush and the bustle, and this person seeing the sadness in somebody's eyes. You know, you can see the struggle in people, and there's so many lifetimes of stories behind just those moments. And, like, I don't get to experience that if I'm too busy trying to think that I need to be writing. You know, I can away. Because I take away that stillness that I can have. And that stillness is me to be open to receive what's in the universe around me, which is then what's going to come through me in the expression that I have in myself, that will then come out onto the page when I do write again. So if I just focus on that, I'm missing the input side. You know,
you're missing life.
Yeah, exactly. So it has to be something that's danced with constantly. You know? And
it's such a struggle for so many people, because you never know what you might encounter on the outside world. You might see a sentence on a leaflet in your favorite coffee shop, and all of a sudden, your whole world explodes with ideas. And people get so stuck on this idea of the creative block and the creative resistance that it's something I have to overcome. It's this obstacle to my true life. And once I'm over that hump, my life will be perfect and I will be the artist.
Yeah.
I used to think that if I keep a sketchbook and draw every day, I'm going to, you know, tick, 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 I'm going to be the artist. That's done.
Yeah.
But the more I unraveled in my own creative process, And I do it the same with words and with images in order to rediscover myself more. The more I found it's this flow, it's dance, something happens, and it's how you encounter it in life, or what space you open within yourself to allow it to come true.
Yeah, and that's it, because again, it's for me, like I see this again, like through the lens of, we say, ceremonial magic. It's like the intention of where you put your focus is the energy that you're putting towards it. And if I'm focusing on the block, well, I'm creating the block, you know, and it's exactly as you said, but I'm also missing everything that's happening over here, because all my focus is here on the block, and it's like life is happening here, you know, and like, this is the feed, this is the fuel for the creative outlet, you know, as I feed in the experiences of life, and even just to sit back and watch life is me being part of life. And as I do that, that's the fuel that comes into me. And then as I process inside myself the way that I work personally, and like everybody has their own individual flow, then that's how I process the external world in through me. And then as I create outwards again. So it's like I'm missing that fuel if I'm focused on just one aspect. You know, it's the same vice versa. If I'm just focused on the life and I'm not having the outlet, and then I'm missing that part. You know, it's that merging, it's that union. You know, it really is the alchemical marriage. Like,
what really comes to me now is that when you're in the process of creation, you almost go into the archetype of the hermit. but you have to come out of that archetype as well and put on a different one, right?
Yeah.
And you have a new course as well coming out on tarot and the archetypes, right?
Yeah. So it's I have this course has actually been created in my head for about 4 years. It's only fine. I wait until things feel absolutely right for me before I do things. And there's so much that I follow, like, but so yeah, the tarot course it's actually the occult keys of the tarot. So it's very different to, it's not like a course on divination. It's true ancient sacred teachings around tarot and the symbolism of what it's only the major arcana. I'm not focusing on the minor arcana. And it goes through like the stages that are set out in the cycle of life, basically, that we go through the different stages. So again, the 22 major arcana cards are archetypical energies, and they're a set cycle that we all go through in life. So it's like your day-to-day life. It's also the steps that we apply in any creative project. And again, life itself is creation, so it applies in any level. So again, we talked about earlier on about having the goal. And how do we kind of go through that process without kind of getting lost? And because obviously the goal seems overwhelming because it's so big, and it's about the steps. Well, even with this is what's in this teaching of the tarot course that I'm bringing, is it subdivides it into 22 very specific steps that we can actually apply, and it actually helps to focus us as well, kind of minutely, rather than kind of getting lost in the big goal at the end. It breaks into the steps. So I just need to focus on this now. Yeah. I just need to focus on this now. And sometimes we need to go back a step.
And remind me again, it's the journey of the Fool, right? Into what's the end product?
So yeah, so if you go through the 22 cards of the major arcana, so you begin with the Fool, and you end with the World, and then after the World, you begin with the Fool, and so on, and it keeps going. And it is the process. It's also the process of life. It's
and
the
the Fool is
well.
the new beginnings, yeah, the person who almost jumps off the cliff into the unknown.
Yeah, because again, like everything has its shadow. There's a polarity to everything. So like the Fool unactivated or activated in the negative is what we consider, I suppose, in modern times, the Fool, you know, because you have all this ability, but you're not activating it. So you're considered a fool because you could be doing some more. So that's like the Fool energy, not activated. So again, if you think about like from a creative point of view, you know, I have something, but I keep running from it. And so what happens is you become stagnant. And so this creative energy is just going to burn you up inside. It's going to create all sorts of anxiety or whatever shows up for any individual person. But then you activate the Fool. And because the Fool is unlimited potential. It's just untapped potential yet. It's the seed in the ground that hasn't risen above the earth yet. So you don't see anything. It's, you know, it's planted, but you don't see its growth. So then you start to take the steps and you bring in that growth. And that works in every aspect of life. So that's like, again, manifestation for me is about divine manifestation, not I want something. It's something that comes, and again, talk about the creative force. That for me is what pure and true manifestation is. It's not something that you want. It's something that comes to you, that shows you it's who you are. You just have to now create the steps to get it.
And I love how you're speaking about the other side of tarot. I feel like tarot can have such a bad name that it's, you know, woo-woo, black magic. It's the gypsy woman on the side of the street giving you a quick reading of how you're gonna die. And that I feel that it has such a bigger depth to it, and it's about those seeds and actually activating or noticing what within you is activated or disactivated.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you go back, like for me, like all my stuff comes from I study very ancient topics and philosophies and aspects, and like the ancient mystery schools. I mean, we don't know exactly when tarot began, but there was definitely some form of it back in the magic schools or with the mystery schools going back into ancient times. And that's what it was, is because the symbolism that's in the tarot cards, in particular the major arcana, are deep. I mean, this is what psychology was in ancient times. Like psychology is ancient, you know, and that's, you know, I mean, Jung was probably the only well-known and top psychologist who ever really went into that depth of to come from the ancient approach and merge it with the modern form of psychology. But that's what was in these ancient schools, and these is because they had assessed life, they had assessed the universe in its totality, not just the physical but the non-physical as well, and to merge that union, because that's what we are. Is we are part of the universe. We're not separate. You know, we show up differently, but then if you really want to boil it down, we actually show up the exact same, because we are the universe. So it was this mythology or methodology of how we could actually decipher this path in union with what the cycles again of the universe, and because everything is cyclical and life is cyclical. So I was able to kind of take from the larger scope of the macro universe and bring it down into the micro version, and to actually use it as a navigational system so that we can actually identify ourselves, identify where we're going, what we need to do, where we're at, and also where we've come from, and on and on and on, you know.
You've kind of answered one of my questions already, which was, because I'm a big nerd as well, and I love learning and finding out new things and going into the deep ancient histories that exist in the world and schools of thought, and how much wisdom and how much grounding they can actually give us, because it's like this deep well of never-ending resource. So if you could maybe reiterate how that, you know, this quest for knowledge and finding out your own truth has built a stable foundation, and it's literally the work that you're doing in the world now, but how has that been the ground for your tree to grow?
yeah, and that's, I mean, this has been the very foundation of me, you know, and this is something I think when I always say it, like about this great work, like that's what it brought me back to. It brought me back to what I actually came in with, and to really tap into it from a much more mature level, if that's kind of the right way of putting it. Like a seeker of truth, I've always kind of once said it was probably an easy way that I could describe what I am or what I do, you know, and what it is I'm here for. And I think it's what we're all here for, is to seek out truth. And through that aspect, I've always been seeking wisdom, seeking knowledge, and I always felt that there was something bigger, there was something more. The world I grew up in didn't fit with me. You know, it didn't connect. I felt very disconnected, and I always felt that there was something deeper that wasn't being shown or that wasn't being spoken about. And I was drawn to these ancient cultures from a very young age. And I started looking into these and kind of studying. I say study, but I mean, it was just an interest at that age, you know, and which is a study, because I started to seek out as much as I could and to kind of learn as much as I could. And for me, that search for truth, as I've gone through so much stuff, as I realized that search for truth is a search for, without triggering people with the load of word, but it's a search for God, because for me, truth is God, it's divinity. And again, divinity and God are words, which means they're limited. God in its sense is something that we can't define. You know, it's everything, it's the entire universe.
I've heard a beautiful description of God and divinity in the sense that if you've ever seen a snowflake in its complex geometric pattern, you've experienced divinity and the beauty of creation. So without, you know, the pressure of the word God and attaching to any religion, we are aware of this beauty of creation everywhere we go.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And it's a good analogy as well, because what we see is a snowflake can be just some piece of dirty, white, cold, frozen wet, you know, that falls. But when you actually look into it and beyond the surface layers, it starts to unveil its beauty and its divinity. And that for me is like we were saying earlier on about like finding the divinity in everything. Like on the surface level, we don't see that. But if you look into it, you see the symmetry, the geometry, and you see the divinity that's in it. But it takes us to look beyond the surface to find the divinity in things. And that for me is a search for truth, is because whatever the surface is, whatever we've been told, whatever we've been programmed, whatever we've been conformed to, it's up to us to lift off the surface. Not because someone else says what it is. You know, that's not anything against anybody else, but my version of divinity, what I find, might not be the same as yours or the next person. But the fact is that's the divinity is resonating to the divinity in me, or where I'm at. Which is another point is what symbolism is how it speaks, is you're attuning to those levels. But for me, it's been always been that, because I have this thirst. And the beauty about this thirst is I know it'll never be fully quenched. But it gets quenched partially, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, which keeps me going. And it's unveiling all that wisdom that's stored there. It's stored in us all. Every one of us knows absolutely everything. We just have to tap into it. And for me, so that's why everything is the one thing. Like the creative aspects, life, the work, the journey, it's all parts of finding out who I am, and by removing layers of what I'm not, to find closer to that truth of who I am. And then that truth gets to be expressed outwards in the way that I live, the way that I express, in anything that I do, in my work, you know. So it's becomes that synergy where it's starting to live the creative life more and more and more. So it's beautiful.
Why wouldn't you want to go down this path?
Yeah, exactly. You know,
it has its shadows, but there's so much light on the other end of it, right?
Yeah, and I mean the shadow is light. It's just been neglected of it. That's all, and that's something. I mean that the beauty this journey has taught me is. I speak about it a lot, like in my own life. I mean, my life was miserable, absolutely miserable. But I was responsible for that. You know, you can't go blaming the circumstances that happened to you for, you know, you have the power to dig in, you have the power to change. I mean, like, it is about perspective, but it's not as simple as saying, okay, you just got to look at the world as a positive. There's, you know, you have to face those shadow aspects that make you attached to the negative to actually look at that. And that's the beauty. That's going back to the alchemy. That's the transmutation again. Is like, you are the alchemist. You know, you are the master of the universe. This is only your universe. What's going on for you is a completely different universe to mine. We correlate, just like with anybody else on the planet.
Like right now.
Yeah, exactly. And we have that synergy, but there's parts that are just for me in how I explore and how I'm going to see the world and how I develop me, and the same with you and anybody else. And I think that's what's so beautiful about creativity, like, and just creating in general, is the fact of when you're really in tune with that becomes your version of it, and however that comes out. And that's the dynamic of it. Like, you know, it's not trying to be like somebody else. It's just being you. You've
mentioned symbolism and connecting to your truth. And one of the greatest gifts that you gave me actually is shamanic drumming, and connecting to my own inner landscape. And it has always allowed me to tap into this greater dimension of what's already inside of me. And whenever, you know, I go on a journey, it allows me to quite literally go on the journey of either getting an idea and getting the full creation already, or find a symbolism that unlocks something else, that gives you the first step, and then it goes on to the next step.
Yeah. I mean, that's, like, for me, like, symbolism is my number one language. It's probably better than English, like, to be quite honest. Like, but yeah, and because again, if I go into my own approach,
in the next podcast, we only talk in images.
Yeah, that's it. Just hold up the images. That's it. You get the message. But like that, but that is it, because it is the language of the universe. Like, it's the language that bridges all cultures, creeds, and everything. It's the language of humanity. It's that union, because we all speak it. We all speak it fluently. You know, we just haven't been practicing it, and that's and it's so simple to just to fire it back up again. And it is, because for me, it's the truth of each person's divine path, because, like, for example, I see a big problem in the world at the moment around symbols, is because people are being told what symbols mean, and that is not how symbols work.
Yes.
Because it's impossible. Like, because a symbol, you have to understand, when you understand the laws of the universe, well, to the minute level that I understand the laws of the universe, I will say, I don't understand the laws of the universe completely at all, but it's how everything works and how everything plays out. And there's so many laws, and one of them being polarity. And symbols have polarity, just like anything else has. So any symbol can mean the absolute positive and the absolute negative, but it also means everything in between. So if somebody tells you where on the scale that symbol sits, well, then you're going off their version of reality and not yours. Yeah. So that's their path. And depending on what my energy is like today, if I look at something, it'll speak to me. A certain symbol will speak to me because that's the energy. You're talking about like alliance to the divinity that's in everything, as I mentioned earlier on. So everything comes from the all. So even matter is like manifested on the material plane, on a very dense plane, but there's still divinity in it because everything comes from the all.
And that's what tarot does as well, right? That it reflects exactly what your mindset is in this exact moment. So if you're having an awful time, if you're thinking X, Y, or Z about a situation, for example, oh, I hate this person, then it's gonna directly reflect the hatred.
Exactly, it manifests outward because that's the energy, and that's how symbols work. It's you're supposed to read from the resonance of you. And so like we're working like in spaces in particular, like it's, obviously if you're creating a field of energy, you're going to be more in tune to it, so you can kind of help guide. But I mean, I always say, even in spaces I work, is like, look, I'm just a guide. If it doesn't resonate, don't take it, because it's like the dreamer. It's only the dreamer can actually validate the dream. You can guide someone. If it doesn't sit with them, you don't force it, because then you're probably forcing something that's in you onto somebody else. But that language of symbolism is beautiful, because it is, the way I like to describe it is, we have divinity or super consciousness, and you use all these different words. We have the subconscious, and then we have the conscious reality. So you have 3 stages of consciousness, and our consciousness, our conscious reality, our day-to-day, our awareness, like that can be tainted by so many things. Like something upsets me today, then my conscious reality is out of whack. It goes by that. I turn on the news, I can be fed fear, and that's my conscious reality going to be changed and altered. The subconscious it's not tainted because it's stored. I always say the head, I don't know where it's stored, but maybe it's even outside the body.
Somewhere.
Yeah, it's someplace, but it's contained, so it can't be tainted. Now, the problem is sometimes when we read from the subconscious, we can read it through the lens of the tainted conscious reality, if that makes sense. So if I'm in fear, I might read that as a fearful way. But the subconscious is what actually bridges the super consciousness or divinity into us. And so it flows. So it's like the mediator. And then it passes it into us. And so once we can kind of align ourselves into kind of more center, we can start to read what's coming through from divinity. So it's a divine path. And there's different modalities that we can do to tap into that. I mean, tarot is one, 100%. I always say as well with tarot, like that, if it's something really close to you, you're better off to get somebody else to read. Because we want to read what we want, not what is centered, what it is supposed to be, we'll say. But the same like with shamanic journey, it's another method of being able to go in, and it's actually a method of, I mean, you can change the language here, because words are symbols. So like it's, you talk from the shamanic approach, you're going into the lower world. In modern terminology, or from a psychology point of view, that's into your subconscious. And when you go into your subconscious and you set an intention, so you set your goal, but you never get to. It's all about the journey and what information comes through symbolically in that journey. And that will show you what's inside. That will show you what's out of balance. It will show you what you're being guided to.
And there's so many different ways to reach that place or explore that place. It can be meditation, ecstatic dance. It can be a walk in nature. It doesn't have to be shamanic drumming, going out into the jungle, or it doesn't have to be also going into a cave to meditate. You can,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the case. Like, it's whatever works, and sometimes you can switch it up. It's entirely up
dance.
To. Yeah, I mean, like, that's it. Like, there is no wrong. That's the thing, is everything can be whatever you make it to be. I mean, obviously some things will align with some people more than the next person, and vice versa. But there's so many methods that we can tap into that, and like for me, it's been a phenomenal tool because that language speaks to me so clearly as well. And when I'm stuck sometimes on aspects, just like you said, I go in and have a look and say, okay, what's going on here? And come back out, and it's just like, actually, even when I'm in it, I find out, like, and it's like, oh yeah, that was so obvious, and it's just these simple little things that block us, that we don't often see in our day-to-day life, because we're so consumed by day-to-day life, and what's happening around us, what we're being fed, what's in the environment, that it distracts us from that truth. And when we can use a practice, again, like you said, it can be meditation, it can be anything, just something that
going to the coffee shop.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Just something that takes me away from me trying to fit into the pace of something that's not mine, you know, and it takes me back to my own pace. So again, whether it's meditation, whether it's the drum, whether it's just sitting and drinking a cup of tea, you know, whatever works, you know, that allows me to come back and stop trying to run to the pace of society and come back into the pace of me and pace of nature. And that gives me that stillness for clarity, you know, which again is and again, like even through symbolism, I watch symbolism in everything. Like I see, as I'm sitting there watching people walk past, I'm seeing symbolism in that. Like I'm seeing different things, different traits and different things that people do, and it's all symbolic. And I can take that back into me, because if I'm spotting it, it means it's in me. It's something that's highlighting for me. I'm like, oh, and I can get clarity. You know, so it's everywhere. You know, it's just getting to that point of being so open to receive it, which is like what we were saying earlier on. It's about, like, you know, it's that merging of the masculine and the feminine. It's like having the time to be slow. And not so, because it's not so much slow, but just to be still, that I'm actually open to receive. Because I can't receive if I'm running. You know, I'm moving too quickly. So it's like, this is like me, you know, to be able to draw it in, is by taking that time to say, okay, this is a time for this. Now, this all sounds beautiful and perfect, but I have my struggles with this as well, you know.
It's a journey, right?
Yeah.
And it draws me into this like beautiful conclusion of find your own rhythm. Find your own rhythm and be open to what is happening around you.
Yeah.
That's it's not about the running. Whatever you're encountering, whether it's your creative process, we're really talking about how your relationship with life is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is it exactly, because your pace is not going to be the next person's pace. And I kind of get a strong sense at times sometimes now, when I'm getting better at it, getting tuned into myself a bit more. You know, if I'm not outletting, basically, I start to get anxious. And I kind of really sense now, like I feel it like as that fire, the creative fire. I feel it in my system, and I feel if I'm not having a release for it, a proper release for it, or a healthy outlet, then I'm going to start to get kind of anxious. I'm going to start to get impatient. I'm going to start to kind of almost start to talk negative to myself in the mind, because I have this burn that's inside me that is supposed to be used for something, and I'm avoiding it, or I'm distracting myself from it. So I kind of start to feel that sense, you know, when it's coming at me that way. And that's me trying to learn my own rhythm, is to trying to see, okay, this is the sign that I'm supposed to be doing something. It's like, I think there's some saying or some quote that I can't think. It's about like writing. If you can't write, you know, you should read. You know what I mean? And you know, if you know, and there's another one, something. But if you're stuck for ideas or something, is to read or something. But if you're, I can't remember, there's something about writing as well. Anyway, there's some aspect around that, but I find that really, really helpful. It's like finding that rhythm through that. If I'm feeling
find
stuck,
an inspiration or a similar energetic print of what you're trying to get to. Yeah,
exactly. Because if my mind is too active, I have too much going on, I need to write. That's a sign that there's too much going on, you know. And if I'm stuck, I need to read. You know, I think that's what it was, is to create that balance.
Beautiful.
Because I'm bringing in the creative aspect of how I assess what I'm reading. Like I love the ancient poets. Like I love going to the Homer and likes of that, because I read aspects of that, and it just awakens that ancient part of me. And also the way they expressed in ancient times is so different now. It was so symbolic, and that fires me to start looking at my modern world in a whole different lens now. And so I start to see the ancient ways, and the gods are in everything, you know, and the different, again, go through the cycles of the year, how we have the different gods come through at different times. Because there's the story of humanity, the psychological story of humanity, and the cycles that we go through is in that as well. So that kind of resets me back into thinking that way, so that now I see my world around me that way, which then gives me more avenues of that fire to be able to express outwards. So it's kind of just, again, just getting that dance and that rhythm of life, and finding out, like, again, as you said, it's my rhythm. What do I need? Because if I'm too buzzy, I need to get something out, you know? And then if I'm too flat, I need to get something in.
And it hands the power back to you. You know, talking about myths and gods, if we talk about, you know, taking fire from the heavens and it being brought down to earth, this is it. You're giving this power, this fire, this electricity, this energy to create something. And it's a responsibility to carry that as well.
Yeah. I mean, you go back into the story of Prometheus there, like, you know, in the Greek I mean, Prometheus who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. I mean, there's so many ways symbolically you can break that down, but that is exactly it. Because to be God, to be in our own divinity, is to have that creative fire. And if we detach from it, that's us stealing from the gods. It's not stealing from the gods, but it's like merging us back into the fact that we are gods. You know, we are divine. And if we're not in our creative aspect, we're not, because everyone is creative. Every single person. Yeah. I mean, every person is. I mean, you might not have tapped into what yours is yet, or maybe you're dancing around it because of all those things you mentioned, the fears and what have you. But that is your divinity. When you ignite that fire, it's unstoppable. Like once you kind of get the momentum on it and you start putting more fuel into it, which is the trust and everything else that you build into it. But then it's no longer a separation from us and the gods, because that fire is that connection. All that separates us from the gods is that fire. Whether it's the fire of consciousness or it's the fire of creativity, whatever way you want to work it, it's still the same thing. So we've now merged ourselves back to divinity. We've patched that severance that we had. We brought back in the divinity of ourselves by activating that creative aspect of ourselves. And to live in that fire, to be that fire, just to walk around in flames, you know, and it's just like, you know, it is that aspect.
And life then becomes amazing. I love the phrase that I use is love the life you live and live the life you love.
Yeah.
And it's, you're just taking everything that life is giving you and you're making it amazing. Even if it's tragedy, if it's shadow, if it's stress. It creates a canvas of your own life for your own.
And it's a completely unique canvas. Nobody else has that. And nobody else can have it. Just like you can't do somebody else, because that's not you. You know, that the best that you can be, that flame can only burn its brightest by you being absolutely you. And that's it. Like nothing else is going to fuel that flame. Only you. The closer you get into you, the bigger that flame gets. You know, you go into the center of the onion, and that's where that spark is. You got to cultivate that spark. And the Rosicrucians in the mystery school, that's what it was all about. Is the spark at the center of the heart, which is our divine spark. And it's about getting the layers off it so you can let that spark become a flame and then a fire, and that'll be a blaze, an inferno. You know, in the end stage, and that's what we're going for. And like for me, like I've changed a lot of the way I work lately. And I have an online platform now where I kind of bring a lot of my work onto, which is activating in so many different ways what's on it. But it's me and me. It's me in my absolute essence. It's all the ancient wisdom. It's all the ancient practices molded into one in its day-to-day application. And that's, for me, when I'm doing this, it's like I feel like I'm just on fire. Like it's just like, as in not, you know, we said earlier, not the on fire, oh, look at me, I'm on fire. But like that, but just that creative burn.
Aliveness.
Yeah, it's me. It's just my essence is coming through. This is what I love. This is what really speaks to me. And this is me getting it out as well. So that's the creative avenue of that, and it's my life.
And in my experience, whenever I have denied that, or if I've tried to shut myself down, or have been afraid of my own expression, that's when things like depression comes in, and I fall, instead of going forwards, I fall even deeper into myself, and then it's this, how do I even get out? Yeah.
And then sometimes like that depth of the fall is what's necessary
until cycle,
you get to the point, until you get to that point where it's like, and then you have that rebirth again.
Because there might be something there down in the deepest well. And actually the well is a really interesting metaphor that I heard recently, where the water overflows and everything comes out of it, so you can get to the very murky, dense mud in the bottom, and so that then can be, brought into the surface.
Yeah.
Because if the water is full, then you can't really see what's down there. But the contamination or the murkiness is there all the time.
Yeah. Take up that dross.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like there's so much, like there's again, like you think about the conditioning of life. I mean, if you look back through history, like, and you look at like these great artists and creators, like they're all considered a little bit mad, and like that madness is them being them, without caring about the restrictions or the societal constraints. Oh, you should act a certain way, you should be a certain way, and they're just like, this is it, and I have my beautiful creative outlet. I'm not saying that we should all go mad, like, but I mean, like, it's a case of being you, obviously without harming anybody else or harming yourself, like, but like it's tapping into that rawness and not caring about other people, and or not so much not caring about other people, but just caring more about yourself, nurturing you, that you're here for you. Yeah. This is your life, you know, and like tap into it. And obviously that does take work. I understand that, but I'm just saying like that's the purpose, because otherwise you're not living a full life. So it's really going in there and just really getting those dark parts, because that's where that creativeness comes from, is you learning about yourself and tapping into, as you say, going to that murkiness at the end of the well. That's part of the well. You can't just, no, I don't like that part because it's a little bit mucky or dirty. It's like, no, bring it in as part of me.
Yeah.
And
make
like,
it your power.
Yeah, exactly. That's the transmutation, led into gold again. Like, you know, it's not
full circle.
Yeah, it's not something that weighs me down, but it's something that has that's what my value is. My value is those dark parts of me, and how I put the sun on it, how I put the light upon it. Like,
and it's also not to condone those parts of us and those moments where we do fail and when we are in the muck, because it's all part of the story. But we get to reclaim how we write that story or rewrite it after we've been through that period of darkness. To
become whole.
Yes, that's a beautiful message to finish on. I think. So if people want to find you, where do you send us some details?
So Instagram is at subconsciously.conscious. Facebook, just my own name, Peter Kelly. I have a website which is peterkelly.online. I think that's mostly based. I have that tarot course which I've come up, the Occult Keys of the Tarot. It's an online course as well, so that's starting in the beginning of January. So if anyone's interested in that, they can reach out and I can give them information.
And you don't have to be a tarot reader or have any interest. Right?
No.
It's just a modality.
Yeah, so I mean, like if you're a tarot reader, you're going to get a much deeper understanding of symbolism of the 22 cards, because I go through the lens of symbolism, deep symbolism. But it's a path of life to understand. It's also a path of divine manifestation as well that can be applied. So it kind of incorporates everything like that. And the other aspect as well is just I have the new platform, which is the community platform, which is the Path to Gnosis. So if anyone is interested in that, it's hard to put into words. It has to be experienced. So there is a 7-day free trial on it as well if anybody wants to just kind of sample it for themselves, because it goes into a lot of like deep esoteric wisdom, occult wisdom, alchemy, hermeticism, tarot, the Kabbalah, and then all morphed into its day-to-day use through ceremonial magic, which is what we all do anyway, even if we're just not aware of it.
But your title sums it up beautifully. I mean, it's the path to knowing yourself through these various tools, and they might not be for everyone, but the key is to take whatever you want from them. Yeah,
that's it, to unlock yourself.
Yeah. Ooh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is great. And to anyone watching, hope you follow Peter on all his social media. He's a great guide on this journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. One of the pieces that Peter left me with was the importance and the value of the energy that we infuse into the things that we create. As someone who struggled with creative block and feelings of hopelessness or losing the vision for my own creative process, this was a very important piece for me that continues to unravel. So I would love to listen and learn about what nuggets of wisdom you were left with. So drop it in the comments below. And if you would like to support this podcast, you can buy me, my guests, and my beautiful cameraman a coffee, and also follow the link below for that. So I look forward to the next one.